Hello. Thanks for having me do this. I'm excited to kind of show y'all some of this. So I made a short little presentation. Let me just share my screen. Okay. And hopefully my dogs will not bark too much in the background. Okay, so this is the cookbook we're cooking from today, Flavor, and obviously doing the barley, tomato, and watercress stew, but with a few substitutions. So first I just wanted to talk a little bit more about Ottolenghi. He is based in London, but is an Israeli-born chef, and he is a very prolific cookbook writer. But he has a lot of cookbooks that I really love. I own multiple of his cookbooks and frequently use them. So two of the other ones that I really love of his are Plenty. That was one of the first ones he did. That's basically all vegetables. And he has some really great recipes from that, including a lot of like pretty easy ones like fritters made out of leeks or sweet potatoes, as well as some more complicated ones like stuffed onions that are kind of baked in a pan. And then one of my other favorite cookbooks by him is called Jerusalem, that he co-wrote with Sami Tamimi, who is a Palestinian-based or Palestinian-born, also London-based chef. And so they kind of did like a combo of both Jewish and Muslim recipes that would come out of Jerusalem. And that is also a great cookbook that has some hummus recipes, as well as an herb pie that I really love that's similar to spanakopita. So those are some other cookbooks by him that I personally really enjoy. And he, I think, just has great recipes that are often very vegetable forward, but are not only made for people who are vegetarian. They're very enjoyable and very delicious, even if you do like meat. So again, this is the recipe that I'm kind of going to be walking y'all through today. And then I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the substitutions. So kind of like Erin mentioned, because of COVID, I'm attending NYU online right now. And so I live in a very small town in West Texas. And so my grocery store options are pretty limited. So I had to make quite a few substitutions. So as I kind of mentioned in the first recipe, these were some of the substitutions I made. But I also just kind of wanted to encourage people to make substitutions based on what they have available in their own grocery stores or what they already have at their house, as well as preferences just based on your taste. So like if you do not, a Scotch bonnet pepper is something that's extremely spicy. If you do not want super spicy, you could swap it out with a serrano or a jalapeno. Additionally, if you were dairy free, there is cream in this recipe, but you could easily swap that out for like a coconut milk or a yogurt. And additionally, if you were also vegetarian and didn't want to use anchovies, you could use like a miso or an olive, something like that. But I just think it's great for home cooks to get more comfortable with kind of making some of these swaps for whatever works in your pantry or for whatever works for your taste or your family's taste. So that was kind of why I made some of the substitutions. But I also think it's just always great to make them as you see fit. Okay, so now, does anybody have any questions? Let me see if I can stop screen sharing. There we go. Okay. I don't know if anyone has any questions right now. The next thing I was going to do was basically just walk through the last part of the recipe, which is kind of sauteing the final vegetables and then plating the final dish. And then y'all can just continue cooking and I can answer any questions along the way if there's any that arise. I don't know if that sounds good to people. Okay.
Really quick, if I, yeah. I see lots of sunlight through your window. So not rainy or it's not snowing there? Because
No,
it's been all day.
we've been at like the high 60s to the low 70s.
Oh, wow.
So very different than New York. Yeah.
Windows beautiful there. You have a beautiful kitchen.
Yeah, I'm in very West Texas, so I'm like high up in the mountains. I'm at like decent elevation, but it still is Texas. So it still is pretty warm, and we don't have a lot of snow or anything like that. And I'm enough west and enough more in the desert that I also don't have a ton of rain. Yeah. Anything else? Okay. Well, I was just going to walk through a little bit of the final part. So I basically have my sauteing ingredients ready. So I had to use red onions again this time because I could not find shallots, and then I also couldn't even find yellow onions. And then I have my lemon peels, caraway seeds, and I have some dried peppers because I also could not find any fresh peppers. And then I have wine and water, as well as the garlic, which I like to add towards the end because burnt garlic to me tastes really bad. If you are ready for that, I already have my barley cooked off, and I have also already made my green sauce for topping, which basically you just want like a fresh herb sauce. It should be pretty bright green. And then I would just encourage you to kind of adjust it to your taste. If you want it to be a little bit more acidic, you could put some vinegar in addition to the lemon juice. Or if you want it to be a little saltier, a little peppier, or more peppery, you can kind of adjust that to your own taste. So I've turned on my pan, and I'm gonna let that warm up a tiny bit. Put in a tiny bit of olive oil. I only put in really enough to cover the bottom of the pan. You can always add more if you want, but it's hard to take out. And this is, again, the final part that's after you've cooked your barley and after you've cooked your either turnip or kohlrabi. And I'll grab those out of the oven just to show y'all while my oil's heating up. I like for the turnips and or whatever to get pretty browned. And I cut them about a similar size to the cherry tomatoes. And I also like for the cherry tomatoes to get pretty shrivelly and like desecrated, because then they'll start leaking out some of their juices, and they should be pretty tasty. But I definitely, again, want pretty brown. You can take it a little less if you prefer, but I think that's when they taste pretty good. So then if your oil's heated up, I would turn the heat down a little bit since you're going to be adding spices and some other stuff so that you don't have like an oil splatter. But once your oil is heated up and kind of shimmering around your pan, you can add in your onions, and you can also add in all the spices. If you're using a non-stick pan, then you should use a non-metal spoon. You should use a plastic. And then just kind of let those start to cook around. It's totally okay to like fry these spices. They'll be really delicious. They'll get kind of toasty and really good tasting. And then for the onions, all you want to do is just kind of soften them to cook them a little bit. And like I mentioned before, I don't like to add the garlic until the end, towards the end, because it's pretty easy to burn. Yeah, we can wait on that to cook a little bit. And then the other substitution I had to make, I could not find arugula, but I found pea sprouts. So I used that, and then I used some spinach to make my green sauce. So again, just, use whatever you have on hand. The point of the green sauce or the herbs is to just add some nice, you know, green taste. It doesn't have to necessarily be something super specific. Does anybody have any questions while this is kind of cooking down?
So is the green thing just a paste of spinach? You just blended it?
Yeah, so this was basically, in the original recipe, it calls for watercress, which is going to be like a little bit spicier than a spinach or an arugula, but they'll basically function the same. And if you have a blender, or if you have like a spice grinder, or even if you have a mortar and pestle, you could use that. But basically you're combining the green vegetable, the lemon juice left over from your lemon peels, and then olive oil and salt and pepper.
Oh, what about, I have a basil pesto in my fridge, so is it okay?
I think you could just use that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's like I think the function of the green sauce in this recipe is just to kind of add a little bit of like freshness and a little bit of oil. So whatever you have is probably going to like function pretty well for that, and it doesn't need to be, you know, exact.
Oh, thanks.
So my onions are cooking down like pretty well. I'm going to turn the heat down a little bit because some of the thinner ones are like getting a little too brown. But once the onions start to cook, that's when you'll add the tomato paste. And the recipe calls for about 3 tablespoons. So if you measured that out, that's great. If you didn't, you can just kind of eyeball it, which I'm gonna eyeball it. And then after the tomato paste cooks down a little bit, it will cook into kind of like a brickish red color. And that's when you know it's like will be cooked and kind of incorporated and really tasty. And then that's when you can deglaze with your wine and water. Then you'll bring that up to a boil, and then we'll add the already cooked barley, and then kind of let those incorporate so that the barley kind of takes on the flavor of the onions and the wine and the garlic. And you'll cook that for a little bit, and then we'll like assemble our final dish. So these are looking pretty good. I'm gonna add my tomato paste at this point. And again, I'm gonna eyeball it. And I cooked a little bit. I'm eating alone tonight, so I cooked a little bit of a smaller portion as well. But if you just kind of stir around your tomato paste, and again, if you're kind of looking for it to cook maybe about a minute until it gets to a kind of more like brick color rather than the really bright tomato-y color. So yeah, it's kind of now all on all the veggies. It's darkened a little bit. That's looking pretty good. And then you can finally add your little bit of garlic if you would like, and let that cook for a tiny bit. Again, I like to add it at this spot just so that I don't overcook it or burn it. And once you've kind of cooked that a tiny bit, then you can deglaze with the wine and the water. And then I would bring that to a boil before you add your cooked barley. Any questions right now? Cool. I'm gonna turn my heat back up. Since there's enough like liquid in there, I'm not as concerned about burning. Also at some point shortly after this, if you want to take out the, so I used the dried chilies, if you want to remove those, as well as if you want to remove your lemon peels. You can leave them in there for a little bit longer if you want it to kind of keep absorbing some of the flavor, but I think this will have mostly done it. So then you don't have to worry about accidentally eating them later if you don't want to. So now this has come up to like a good boil. I'm going to add in my already cooked barley. Stir that around. If you notice that your barley is starting to like soak up all of your liquid, you can just add some more water if you need. If you have like stock on hand, this would be a great thing for stock. But if not, water will just be fine. I'm going to turn my heat down a little bit as well, because it's kind of boiling a bit. You basically just want that also to go for a couple of minutes, maybe up to like 10 at the most, just so that the barley kind of takes on some of the flavor of these like nice cooked vegetables and the tomato paste and the garlic, and the reduced wine as well. So yeah, you can see it's like bubbling pretty well. The barley's like kind of turning a color similar to the liquid. That's looking pretty good. And then again, as long as you pre-cooked your barley, there's also no concern of like needing to cook it in the liquid. You can kind of stop it once you've decided that it has enough of the flavor components. And then I always recommend at this point just to taste it and add anything else that you think it needs. I'm going to add some more salt. And I'm also going to add some nice cracks of fresh pepper. If you don't have fresh ground pepper, that's also totally fine. But definitely do like a nice taste test before you put it in a bowl and eat it. Then if you let it cook around a little bit more, then you can taste again. That's pretty good. I'm still going to add more salt. And again, if you are the type of person that wanted the stew like a little bit more spicy, you could also at this point add some more chili peppers or add some chili powder, or any of your preferred spices if you wanted the stew to be a little more spicy. But that tastes pretty good to me. I'm going to turn off, and then so basically to plate the final dish, if you have a bowl, either just for yourself or for your family, you can use a large bowl, but pour in the barley and the little bit of liquid. Then you're going to top it with your, again, roasted veggies. Just put a little bit on top. And then I'll put on some of the green sauce of whatever variety you have. Again, this just kind of functions to like freshen it up and give it some nice fresh herbs. And then if you have some additional arugula or watercress or whatever you got, you can put that on top as well. Again, just for some nice like little crunchy bits. And that's basically the whole dish. So hopefully that should be pretty easy. And again, I think it's pretty like adaptable to kind of whatever you have in your kitchen, or whatever kind of different tastes you have.